Okay, let me tell you a tidbit about our guest today, Gerry Sandusky. Not only a great guy, but he's also the play-by-play voice for the NFL's Baltimore Ravens. I think we all know he does a fantastic job, along with his partner over there, Stan White. Both of them do a tremendous job. He's also a New York Times.
Stan's been carrying me for years, let's be honest.
Real heavy, huh? Come on, you guys do a great job. What a team. They do not share a room together when they go on the road, though. I heard all about that. Also a New York Times best-selling author, critically acclaimed book, Forgotten Sundays. He's also the president of the Sandusky Group, a presentation skills and media coaching company focused on helping professionals, get this, engage, amaze, and influence audiences. If you haven't checked out Gerry's website, sanduskygroup.com, I strongly urge you to do that. He has a series of videos there that talk about some of the tidbits, of public speaking. A lot of people don't like public speaking. In fact, if you saw the Seinfeld, who's Seinfeld aficionados here? If you saw Seinfeld, people would rather be in the coffin than give the eulogy. So, and Gerry knows, but there's great videos on tidbits of what you can do to relax yourself when you're talking. Now, drawing on a lifetime around pro sports, and he's been there since he was a little guy because his father used to be the coach of the Colts. He's also the co-founder of a company called Trigger. It's a cloud-based tool that helps, leaders and managers see the strengths and weaknesses of their people, their teams, and the various departments in the company. Trigger empowers leaders to draw on continuous performance management. We hear all about that in sports, because in sports we're always trying to improve. This is utilizing that in a business environment, and it really creates a competitive advantage that Gerry's going to talk about in a second. He's also an Emmy and an Edward R. Murrow award-winning broadcaster, lives here in Baltimore with his lovely wife, Leanne, and he's happy to say that his grown children, they live in great places like Nashville and New Orleans, so he has a great place to visit as well. Gerry, we got to talk about. We're talking about sports. You have your life around pro sports. What's going on with the Ravens? You see them every week. We're a 500 team right now.
There's really nothing new going on with the Ravens. Since winning the Super Bowl, the Ravens are 44-44. Yeah, they're 500. Right. They've won as much as they've lost as much as they've won. They've just hit that mid-range level. And part of it is, since the last 10 years, they've only drafted in the first round one Pro Bowler. One guy who's gone to the Pro Bowl in the last 10 years. The first 12 years, every year they drafted in the first round guys who were multiple Pro Bowlers. And so part of that is they are a victim of their own success. And what people tend to think of is you lose your players, but what you lose are your talent evaluators. And so in the last decade, no team has lost more talent evaluators than the Ravens. And replacing those has been extremely challenging. I'm not picking on anybody in particular. It's the nature of the game. The league is set up for parity. And part of the parity is, unlike any other industry, you do everything you can to hold on to your best people. In the NFL, your best people are encouraged to go work for another team. And so it creates this very challenging cycle of how do you maintain a competitive advantage when every advantage you get bleeds out of your organization. And that's the biggest challenge that they face. Now, what they've done very well in the last 10 years are draft third and fourth and fifth round guys. Their team is filled with it. They have the backbone. But what they really miss are those one or two difference makers. You've all experienced this. How many of you, when Ray Lewis played, made a point of getting into your seat early?
Yeah.
Right?
I wanted to see it come.
Nobody does that anymore. Now, you can't, even in the data analytics age, you can't quantify what that means. But you can't tell me they haven't lost a certain edge. In the Ray Lewis era, other teams' players would stand on the sideline and be mesmerized by watching Ray Lewis's introduction. You can't tell me that doesn't create a competitive edge when you're watching me be introduced. Now, the Ravens' own fans don't make the effort to get into their seats early. And they come out. I'm not picking on guys, but look, Joe Flacco was just not going to be the emotional leader of Ray Lewis. He's not wired that way. I'm not going to be a 6'10" forward in the NBA. I'm not wired that way. You're not going to fly a plane tomorrow unless you have a pilot's license, and I'm guessing you don't. You do, so that's why I knew that. So we all have our gifts, we all have our strengths. And so the challenge the Ravens face, and they face it this Sunday, they are right at the intersection. They are at the intersection of crisis and opportunity. And really, every crisis is an opportunity. And the Ravens are right there. If they beat the Steelers, they will re-energize the town. I mean, Ravens-Steelers is Army-Navy, it's Michigan-Ohio State, it's one of the few great rivalries in all of sports. If you win that, we're with you. If they don't win that, the town will essentially say, we'll still love you, we'll miss you too. I mean, those are the stakes, and everybody knows it. And how they handle that, I couldn't begin to tell you because I once predicted the Buffalo Bills would win the Super Bowl 4 years in a row. So if I could do predictions, I'd sit on the other side of the anchor desk and be a weatherman. I just sit on this side and I tell you how it happens, not what's going to happen.
But do you feel that difference? You travel with the team, obviously, and you're there at the beginning of the game. Can you feel that difference? Can you feel that emotion? And with that in mind, what's your prediction? It stays in the room here. We don't have any media.
I could give you a prediction, but literally, my prediction last Sunday, I was on the field with Kevin Burns, the vice president of communications for the team. And I said, you know what, I've watched tape all week. I really like this matchup. Honestly, I don't think the Ravens will win. I think the Ravens will dominate Carolina. The game turned out exact opposite of what I thought would happen. Because you don't know, Bud Grant, he's not late, but the former coach of the Minnesota Vikings, used to always say, we all put in all this work, but the ball is oval, it bounces in ways you can't predict, and strange things happen every week. So tell me somebody who last Friday said, the Panthers will have a pitch out, the ball will miss the running back's hands, it will bounce off the carpet right back into his hands, and it'll gain 9 yards. Then Cam Newton will throw a pass deflected at the line, 4 Ravens will be around it, and a 5'10" running back will catch it in the end zone. That's why I don't do predictions, because something will happen in this game that you cannot predict. The key is, what do you do next? It's no different than business. Look, everybody has a business plan, and business plans are important. Have you ever gone back and looked at a business plan from like 15 years ago? Total bullshit. Right? It's like, what was I thinking? And if you look at businesses that stay in and finally have success, part of it is they just stayed in the game long enough until they could figure out what to do. I mean, Twitter, if you look at how Twitter started off, that was not how Twitter started off. Facebook started off as a way for guys to check out girls in college dorms. I mean, literally, that's how it started. It's a little bigger than that now. Jerry Jones, the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, has a great perspective. He said, some of the greatest runs in the history of the NFL, you never think about and you never see because they were runs just to get back to the line of scrimmage. Just to stay on the field. Because if you lose 8 yards, your chance of getting a first down, very small, and the offense is off the field. If you somehow manage to get back to the line of scrimmage, you're still in business. So that's really what this game's all about. Yeah, they're 4-4. Yeah, they've lost 3 out of 4. Yeah, they've got 2-game losing streak. Yeah, the sky's falling. Do you remember week 4 when the Ravens went to Pittsburgh? That same storyline applied to Pittsburgh. They handled their business. They've won 3 in a row since. Now it's the Ravens' turn. What will they do when the unpredictable happens? And really, it's no different than your business. Each of you has a business plan. Each of you, anybody here not have a problem?
Who doesn't have problems?
So we all have problems, but we also all have opportunities. And I call that the ability to see the opportunity buried in your problem, I call that propertunity thinking. Stan and I experienced this firsthand at Super Bowl 47 in New Orleans, Louisiana. We had a game plan. We had worked for hours getting ready for that broadcast. We had our notes. We had talked through things. We knew exactly what we were going to do. And you asked me about predictions. Funny thing is, nobody predicted a 34-minute blackout. That we would have to do the broadcast on a cell phone on a day when I had bronchitis. Doing a broadcast with bronchitis is like doing a sprint with hamstrings that are pulled. And so I would do this until I ran out of gas. And I would go like this, Stanley? And he would talk into the phone for about 10 minutes. And then I would talk.
I got to talk so much more.
Right. He finally had a platform. And so while it was completely unplanned, to this day, every year the Super Bowl rolls around, the previews always have a clip of Stan and I on the cell phone saying it's dark here in the Superdome and we don't know what's going on now, but we do know nobody predicted this. So I always encourage people, get out of the prediction business. Because if you put too much time into predictions, you'll be so busy looking for what you think is going to happen, you'll miss what's happening. And if you miss what's happening in sports or business, you can't react to it. That's why I don't put any effort into predictions. They're irrelevant. I've done this for many years now, and I've noticed not one single game was ever dictated by my opinion. But my job is very much hinges on me being able to react to what happens. The other thing with predictions is you get so pissed off when you're wrong. You know, we're kind of an arrogant mammal. Dogs don't do that. Cats don't do that, but humans do. We make a prediction, oh, I think they're going to win today. Damn, that team, they suck. No, what really sucked was my prediction. If you just enjoy what happens, you'll be amazed at how much more pleasant the whole experience is. Take the Saints game. People left the stadium, they were so mad. Now, yeah, I was disappointed the Ravens lost, but I considered myself immensely blessed to have broadcast one of the greatest games I ever saw.
Wow.
I mean, it's just about perspective. So what's your perspective on your problems? Everybody has them. Do you see the opportunities that are in the problems? If you don't, start looking because they're there.
And the point is so important. Stay in the present. Be focused on the things that are hitting you right now and work through them. Gerry, we're talking about the chemistry and what we call teamness, if you will, and how guys come together, especially in sports teams. I mean, the perfect segue is now to the Orioles, which you've seen up front and personal as well. What happened to them? I mean, for 3 years.
Reddy, it's an easy, short explanation, and the same applies to all your business. You've all worked for a business at some point in your life where all the employees' number one motivation was don't piss off the boss. That's the Orioles. You can't run that for that long. Now, they were fortunate to have Buck Showalter for that nice run, and Buck had the bravado to be the unique outlier who was able to step beyond that. But eventually, the culture swallowed him too. You cannot build a business. Sports is just a business. It's the business of illusion and entertainment. That's really the business of sports. But you can't build a business if the number one motivation is just don't piss off the boss. That completely eliminates creativity, risk-taking, boldness, customer service. Good luck building your business doing that. That's what's happened with the Orioles. So if every layer is kind of fear-based, once you measure that, I'm willing to predict the Boston Red Sox and the LA Dodgers don't have people in the organization whose number one priority is don't piss off the boss.
So what's the future looking for them? I mean, now we have nobody
Right.
of any magnitude.
The future looks extraordinarily bleak based on one decision. How did Peter Angelos buy the team? No. What I mean, not the fact that he bought it, but did he buy it in his name or did he buy it in his son's name? The way people buy teams now is they buy it in their children's name. And I know there's a couple of accountants and tax people in here. They'll know if you do that, then you can mitigate the tax liability when the owner dies. Well, at some point, Peter Angelos will pass. I mean, he's an older man. That's just human nature. I'm not wishing ill on anybody. At that point, based on the structure of the team, they bought the team for $196 million. It's worth $1.2 billion, $1.5 billion. That's a big tax nut. If the team is in the boys' names, they can handle that. If the team is not in the boys' names, they may have to sell. That, in my opinion, is the single biggest decisive factor for the future of the Orioles.
You think Cal wants to get involved?
Oh, I know Cal wants to get involved. And having Cal as a front person would be a great thing for the organization because it would buy the number one thing that organization needs, which is patience. Because we all know where the business has been run into the ground, you can't turn it around overnight. You have to have people who are willing to get on board for the long haul. As the Orioles are structured now, ask yourself, how many friends do you have who are willing to be on board for the long haul, for more of this stuff now? And the easiest barometer is notice the number of people who are or aren't wearing hats around town. And if you go to Boston this week, everybody's got a Red Sox hat.
Everybody.
Like the only people you'll see in Oriole hats are homeless people. No, because somebody passed it down. Really, it wasn't an intentional purchase. It was something they found in a pile. And that's not unique to the Orioles. You'll see that in any bad sports organization.
People downtown are wearing Red Sox hats.
Right. My son, who's 23 years old, lives in Nashville, is a Red Sox fan. And it's because when he was growing up, it was part of that 14-year span when the Orioles never had a winning season, so he had no way to relate to them. Well, if you're my age, God, we had Brooks, we had Boog, we had Davey Johnson.
We got the picture.
We had World Series, we had Jim Palmer. I mean, we had all those guys. Right, and it was a special thing. It was a point of pride because we could beat New York. We've gone to Q&A already, right? We're out of control. We're spinning out of control.
How do we get Kevin Plank to buy the Orioles?
I don't know that he wants to buy the Orioles.
Okay, just a thought.
I mean, Kevin's a little bit busy at the moment. We're trying to get Kevin to save the city's, real estate right now. And that's an important play. And you know what? He possibly could do it. He can transform a whole part of the city. And you do that, it's a better city.
But we'll get to Q&A in a second.
Let's Kevin do that.
I want to segue a little bit, Gerry. You know, obviously you have a background in sports since you were a little boy with your dad. How did you segue from that and what you're doing now to the software tool Trigger, which sounds to me, I mean,
Okay.
it's really fascinating. You and I have talked about it before. Talk about the continuous performance management related to sports, obviously in business. How'd that happen?
So it's purely by happenstance. Question, how many of you love end of the year employee evaluations? Wow, there's one. He gives them. Right. Talking about the outlier, but most of you hate that, right? Yeah. So during the Ray Rice situation, everybody understood why the Ravens released Ray Rice. That was common sense. But what I found in speaking engagements and seminars and presentations, one of the questions people would ask me was, how come nobody ever re-signed Ray Rice? How come no other team ever signed him? And it falls under the same thing as Colin Kaepernick. A lot of people thought it was racism. It's not racism. It's maintenance. And it goes back to my childhood experience growing up with my father. My dad was an NFL coach literally from the time I was born until I was about 35 years old. In 1972, my dad was the interim head coach of the Baltimore Colts. His rookie linebacker, Stan White. I was a ball boy. How cool is that, right? All these years later. And so growing up, the conversation around the dinner table was always football and people. And so I had this conversation with my dad once when he was in Miami and I was in college. And I said, Dad, that whole thing about coaches all treating their players the same, is that real? He said, nah, total BS. Coaches don't treat all their players the same. He said, there's a sliding scale. The guys who do more to help you win, they get more latitude. The guys who do less to help you win, they get less latitude. It's just that simple. So I set out to figure out what that scale was when the Ray Rice situation came around. Because the Ravens released him literally in minutes. And then nobody picked him back up. And so here's what I discovered in interviewing owners, GMs, coaches, scouts, managers, position coaches. There's 3 areas in sports where you evaluate talent: production, attitude, and maintenance. Production is fairly self-explanatory. It's built around your KPIs. By the way, so let's run through this real quick. For a running back, you know what the KPIs are? Yard per carry average, touchdowns, pass receptions, pass blocking, ball security. If you don't play a lot, the 6th KPI would be special teams. That's it. That's the only reason you pay a running back. You don't pay him to serve lunch, you don't pay him to make the beds, you don't pay him to paint the building. That's why you pay him. Every role in your company has a KPI. Many of your managers won't know what the KPIs are for the people who report to them. Something to keep in mind. So it's fairly easy to understand the production side. Attitude, again, fairly simple. For Ray Rice, after he was released, his attitude actually improved. When Ray Rice went through what he went through, it was humbling, as we've all been humbled by negative experiences. So on those basic parameters, he should be ideal to be hired somewhere. But maintenance is what you cost an organization, financially, emotionally, and socially. Financially, he wasn't going to cost people that much because he would be veteran minimum salary. Emotionally and socially, his cost was too high.
Way high.
So if the Dallas Cowboys signed him like they were looking to do, they lose 1/3 of their fan base right out of the gate. They're in the national media every single day. It's a negative connotation. And yes, it's all because of the video. That's the reality. Flip the script. You have a vice president who works for you, who's a phenomenal producer. He's a rock star. Attitude's fabulous. At the company holiday meal, he has one wine too many, gets on 695, drives in the wrong direction, hits a minivan, kills a family of 4 while wearing your company shirt. Bye-bye. Correct. You instinctively know he's no longer an A player. He's now what we call a replacement player. So I put together through interviews, and then I partnered up with a woman in HR who's been working in the HR field for a quarter of a century, Lisa First Willis, if any of you know her. And what started off as just kind of a scratch sheet explanation grew into an Excel spreadsheet, has now grown into an app and a website. It's trigger123.com. And the tool takes all of these principles that we've learned in sports and applies it to business. But here's the key thing. It's not something you just do at the end of the year. In 1950, the Cleveland Browns became the first expansion franchise. The Cleveland Browns, who eventually become the Baltimore Ravens, become the first expansion franchise in any of the 4 major sports to win the league championship. Never happened before, has never happened since. They did it largely because their coach, Paul Brown, had 3 innovations: training camp, the playbook, and film study. See, back in 1950, the rest of the NFL waited to the end of the year to evaluate its players. year-end evaluations. Paul Brown figured out that if he took film of the game, he could evaluate his players every week and give them specific action plans to improve every week. By the end of the year, the expansion franchise was the best team in the NFL and became the first expansion franchise to win the league championship.
Did they lose their camera?
No, everybody else started to do the same thing. They lost their competitive edge. Well, think of all the businesses you know of who evaluate their talent once at the end of the year. Trigger is designed to evaluate your people in a very quick fashion. It takes about 2 minutes. And if you do it once a month, by the end of the year, you have a dozen more data points that would take a dozen years to get doing it status quo. We just took a simple concept from sports and applied it to a universal pain point in business. And it's, like most good companies, it's a totally accidental company that I never intended to set out to start, but it's been a ton of fun to watch because it gives people a competitive edge.
Explain how it works, Gerry. I mean, how do you able to do it, almost immediately?
Who wants to try? So here's how it works.
What's the website again?
Trigger123.com. Or if you go on the app, go to Trigger Transformation on the iOS or Google store. So once you are on there, you call up an employee. I'll show you how fast this is. Who wants to volunteer for me? Come on up.
Wanda.
Always the volunteer.
Watch this.
Okay.
We're going to take Lindsay Hess. What I want you to do is I want you to have a real employee in mind.
Okay.
Okay, and I'll show you how easy this is.
Management or
Anybody.
Okay.
Anybody who reports to you. You just feel free to sit down if you want to do it. It'll take you less than 2 minutes. Read the questions, hit the answers, and it will produce.
Would you like me to read them out loud to everyone?
No, you just do it. You do it, and I'll explain why you're doing it. So what it does is, what Paul Brown discovered was he didn't need a super complex system. Paul Brown uses a plus, minus, and a 0. So if you were the left guard for the Cleveland Browns, on any given play, you either did your job, plus, didn't do your job, minus, or your job was irrelevant, 0. Didn't take long, he knocked it out, and you would come away with a simple score at the end of the game. From that score, he could look at the landscape of his team, see where he was strong, where he was weak, where he needed to improve. And those same principles we applied. We didn't overcomplicate the questions. We made it simple because not only do people not like employee evaluation, who here has more free time than they did a decade ago? You're retired?
Well, that's an interesting point. There's two things.
Trigger123.com, or the app is Trigger Transformation.
There's two things that managers and
Trigger
executives
transformation.
hate to do. You know what number one is? Number one is terminating people. You know what number two is? Giving performance reviews. Steve, you're an anomaly.
Yep.
And most people despise doing that because they become acrimonious. Especially if there's problems that
Right.
Hey, Gerry, do you use the broadcast part?
No, my broadcast partners are all A players, so I don't have to worry about it. Well, actually, some of them we have triggered, and it didn't work out well in their favor. But it's that same principle, is that if you do a short, quick evaluation, did you hit it?
Uh-huh.
There you go. Oh, no, submit it.
Oh, sorry.
Boop. You hit submit, and this is going to give you the score. So that's an A-plus player.
You evaluate yourself.
No, I did.
So
She's A+.
Accurate?
And she is.
So now, the other nice part is, if you looked at her employee dashboard, it would show you her score over time. And then you could look at your team dashboard and see how many A's you have. And so Trigger breaks,
That is excellent.
it breaks your team down the way we break down a sports team. Your A players, your B players, your C players. A players give you a tremendous competitive advantage. B players, some. C, none. They just fill a role.
Right.
In play, who's your most expensive employee? The one who leaves that you didn't know was going to leave. In play are your free agents that you don't realize are free agents. And replacement players are the players who are going to have a negative impact on your brand you should consider replacing. So as a leader, you get the visual landscape of your team at any given time.
I love the question about the need,
Yes.
because that's one of the big, I have 350 employees, and that is one of the major problems.
Yep.
People are needy. They're high maintenance.
Correct. And we call it, the neediness factor is the legalized, legally scrubbed question. What that question really is the PIA. How big of a pain in the ass is this person? Now, you can't say that legally, so we call it the neediness factor.
Right.
But that impacts your culture. So here's her dashboard. And you can see that employee, now this is a makeup employee, but that employee would be on the rise. you could see there's a trend there. And over the course of a year, you could see where she's strong. All of a sudden, she drops off every summer, or she rises in the fall, or she's consistent. Things you can't see when you do it once a year. Whether you're doing a football player, whether you're doing an account manager, whether you're doing a sales manager. It's all those same principles to give you a competitive edge. Because let's face it, you're only as good as the reality of your team. And if you can't see your team accurately, look, we all lead by gut. Trigger will tell you if your gut's on or off.
Talk about millennials, Jim. We hear so much that they're the toughest group to manage. They expecting the trophy every week.
They don't. Okay.
Some of them.
One in the room here.
Yeah. Parth went to school with my daughter. I love millennials. I raised 2 of them. I do. I love them. I think millennials will prove to be our greatest generation yet, even bigger than the great generation. Here's why.
That's why I don't do predictions.
Right, yeah, exactly. Fair, well played. It is a bold prediction. But part of the reason we don't like millennials is they're so different than us. Hey, go back a generation, your parents probably hated the Beatles, okay? It's change that we don't like. Millennials don't want another trophy. They've got plenty of those. You know what millennials want? Constant feedback. And it's not because they're needy, it's because they grew up with this in their hand. You and I grew up, we wanted to watch, hey, how did the Orioles do tonight? We had to watch Vince Bagley on the 11 o'clock news. How did the Orioles do this minute? Fine, right there. What's going on in Washington right now? I'll call it up live right now. Millennials grew up with this. We all had to grow into this. Most of the people in this room, we were analog. We had to become digital. Millennials were born digital. And so, bless you, we grew up in the old model of once a year, we're going to sit down and I'm going to tell you how you're doing. Well, for a millennial, they're used to knowing within seconds how things are going. They really don't want to wait 9 months to find out how they're doing on the job. My son just celebrated his first anniversary at his job, and it's a tech company in Nashville, and he was really bummed out. You're going to have to leave if I hear one more time. He was really bummed out that they didn't make a big deal and recognize that he had celebrated his first year anniversary. Because that's how millennials are. They're used to feedback.
They're needy.
I've been at Channel 11. Right. I've been at Channel 11 for 30 years. At my 25-year anniversary, they didn't even mention it. It's like that's how it was. It's how it goes. They don't care. But millennials are different. And in 2023, millennials will be the majority of the workforce. So whether you like it, whether it's different, what's changed, that's going to be the workforce. So you can keep fighting it, or you can adapt to it. Look, do any of us get our W-2 statements in the mail anymore? No. Most of us pay our taxes online, all stuff that didn't exist. At some point, you will check your email on your laptop today. If you're like me, when you were in college, you couldn't do that because they hadn't invented email, or laptops, or desktops, or cell phones. But you all use tools today that you didn't have to use 20 and 30 years ago because they didn't exist. Millennials will too. When millennials are our age, they will be using tools that nobody's even thought of yet. And that acceleration of technology will continue to increase. So millennials are really a lot like us. They just grew up digital. We grew up analog. That's the bridge you have to cross. So see, millennials are pretty good.
I'll ask one more question. We'll open it up to the audience. Is there any particular size company that really can use this, or is it all across the board?
Yeah, it's just 4 tiers, 1 to 50. And we call the self-sign-ons. They'll kind of come in and use it. People who don't have an HR department or an HR consultant, and that'll be really the only HR tool you need. 51 to 250 will be the second tier, 251 to 500, and then enterprise or larger companies. Our sweet spot is the mid-size companies. But for the enterprise companies, Trigger is a tool that will integrate with the tools they're already using and greatly enhance them. But for companies between 0 or 1 and 250, we think it's really the only tool you'll need for HR. Because we designed it in a way it's simple, it's easy to use, it's fast, and it's a repository for all. You can attach your documents to it. If you have your PIPs, if you have your legal documents, you can attach it all right there. You can do it on your phone. It can go with you. The cool part, you just experience it. You can trigger 2 people in the time it takes to pump your car full of gas.
Yeah.
So you're stuck in line at Costco, you can knock it out. It just kind of goes with you. It's the way we live now. You don't have to budget 6 hours on a Tuesday when you're already jammed at the end of the year and you're pissed off because you want to be out holiday shopping, and instead you're just kind of randomly cranking through paperwork.
Okay, let's open it up for Gerry. Who's got questions for Gerry?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, Steve.
Yeah, talk about the millennials and the kids today, participation trophies. I mean, what, I'm from the guy, I'm older than you. Where there's success and failure, and that's how you learn in the real world.
Right.
But we're babying our well, in my case, my grandkids, on participation trophies and all that kind of crap. I mean, you think that's good or bad?
Well, I'm not a fan of participation trophies, no. I'm a fan of participation. And part of what we have to teach people, and look, it's the journey we make from being boys to men, girls to women, youth to adult. It's maturing. It's the human process. You know, as we sit here with our gray hair, it's real easy to pretend we saw the world as 20-year-olds as mature adults. It's real easy to fool ourselves like, oh, man, I had this thing wired at 17.
Right.
When really we didn't. But the mistake we've made, I believe, in bringing up the next generation is we've focused on the trophy. Focus on the participation. You heard me say it earlier. Don't focus on the prediction. Focus on the reality. That's the shift I think we have to make. And I trust the millennials to actually make that shift. Think about it. Think of the stuff that you grew up with that you now look at and say, man, that is total waste of time. I predict millennials will not be the parent generation that wants to shower their kids with trophies. They'll actually take a step back and realize, family time might be more important than signing up my kid for that third travel baseball league. My experience with human nature is we tend to adjust. And if you trust human nature, it adjusts.
Other questions?
Someone over there.
Mike?
Oh.
Oh.
I'm going to ask you to talk about things that we're told not to talk about. You said that
I love these.
an organization that fears the leader is a bad organization.
No, what I said was an organization where the number one motivation is don't piss off the leader is a bad organization. That's very different.
Talk about that in our current federal government.
I don't know how many people fear the leadership of our government.
I'm talking Donald Trump.
I'm well aware of what you're talking about. Right. There are plenty of people who don't like him. There are plenty of people who do like him. I'm not here to tell you what your political views are because I'm not nearly stupid enough to do that. I don't know how many people fear him. The bigger issue is respect. If you want to create a great organization, I don't care if it's a federal government, if it's a county government, if it's a transportation company, if it's a technology company. If people buy into your vision, if you consistently share that vision with them, if they feel they have a stake in that vision, if they feel that there's something in it for them. By the way, everybody's favorite radio station is WIFM. What's in it for me?
Yeah.
If that's what's all your employees are listening to that all day, every day. If they hear their benefit in that, then there's a greater chance they will give you not just their hands and their back, but their heart and their head. What we see in the federal government right now is this divisiveness of right and wrong. I'm right, you're wrong. I'm smart, you're an idiot. Well, that doesn't motivate anybody. It just creates a pack of righteous people on this side and a pack of angry people on that side. And you know what that eventually leads to? Civil war. That's the great danger. If you're going to lead a nation, you really need to do it in a way that doesn't piss off half of it. And I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. The best leaders in the history of this nation were able to unite. Show me anybody who faced a bigger challenge than Abraham Lincoln. Literally a divided country, and he found ways to unite it, even after the Civil War. He was the one who said, it might be in the best interest of this nation if we just let Jefferson Davis slip off into history. I'm thinking Donald Trump would have gone more the Roman route of crucifixion. It's just leadership style, but you have to always remember that leadership style leads to outcomes. And the great leaders think of the outcomes first and then fit the leadership style to create those outcomes. To your question.
Well, Covey talks about that in his book, his 7 Habits.
Yep.
Think about the end in mind.
Right.
And then,
it's one of the 7 habits.
Right.
Begin with the end in mind.
It's the first habit.
No, actually the first habit is be proactive.
I thought that was 2, but I'm correct.
you're
Begin with
correct.
the end in mind is the 4th habit. It's the second tier of habits.
I like the
So the question that I see with federal government, and by the way, it doesn't just start with Trump. It goes back several now. It's several. It's the mindset, and it's become the cultural mindset. Is that the end in mind was to win the election. Winston Churchill had a great quote on that. He said, "Politicians think about the next election. Leaders think of the next generation." When was the last time you saw somebody in Washington really thinking about the next generation? It's been a long time.
Long time. Brian?
What's your opinion on why they took an extra day to fire the Maryland head coach?
Perfect example.
Was it a money? Was this for the
So let's go back to trigger, okay? Let's go back to performance, attitude, and maintenance. There's two key principles that I see at play here. One is in times of crisis, academic, financial, social, or business. In times of crisis, do you want to follow a clear and committed leader or a committee? Leader. They followed a committee. And the committee recommended they don't fire the coach because if you fire the coach without cause, you owe him 65% of his contract, which comes to a net sum of $4.2 million. The committee did what the committee was authorized to do, make an intelligent fiduciary responsibility and make a sound business decision. Everybody wants to criticize the committee. No, the committee did exactly what it's supposed to do, make a recommendation based on what is the best thing for this university. But they only factored in the financial maintenance. They didn't financial in the social and the emotional maintenance. So, by not factoring that in, you had a student body on the verge of revolt, you had a governor calling out the entire university system, and you had people across the state furious at the leader because they miscalculated maintenance. That's why Colin Kaepernick is still not in the league.
The good news is it only took them a day.
Correct. They pivot. I give Wallace Lowe a lot of credit for pivoting quickly in the course of a day. Saw this happen in Annapolis. Annapolis put in those bike lanes. The business community was furious. Cost him $100,000, but he pivoted. And it cost the city $100,000 instead of costing the city's businesses millions of dollars. Leadership is not about always being right. Leadership sometimes is about, whew, that was a bad decision, change that. Right? It's being humble. But if you miscalculate maintenance, and I find that's one of the things we've developed with Trigger, is businesses miscalculate maintenance. It's not just what they cost you financially, socially and emotionally.
Steve?
I'm looking at social media with much more skepticism in the last 4 years.
I don't blame you.
As to whether it has been helpful to our society in the last 25 years. And my opinion right now is it's grim. I don't look at it as useful or helpful to us. I think it's destroyed many fabrics. With that in mind, in business, I mean, how useful and helpful, in your experience, is social media to business? The idea of texting primarily versus talking, which a lot of us do now.
Right.
I just talked to one guy here, right here. I just said, dude, I don't want to call you, I'm just going to text you. And I'm thinking, that's so rude, though, man.
Yeah.
I myself am practicing this now. I'm not even talking to people, right?
Right.
My dad calls me, he's 81. Why did you call me? I texted you 3 times, Dad. You know, he can't stand it. He wants to talk to me. I get it. So what is your experience? What are your thoughts?
So I find social media is a lot like a $50 bill. Is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? It's just a dollar bill. It's how you use it. You can't change the nature of it. You can change how you approach it. So I'll give you a very personal example. 7 years ago, on November 5th of 2011, I'm boarding the Ravens flight for Pittsburgh, ironically face the Steelers on Sunday night game the following night. And my producer sitting next to me hands me the phone. He said, there's a reason people are staring at you on this plane. I look at it, he called up the story of Gerry, Sandusky, the Penn State coach who had been arrested and charged with child molestation. Now, for the next year, I was invited on social media every day, thousands of times a day, to spend eternity in hell. Open invitation, ongoing invitation. But I was able to use social media to get my message out, which was simply Gerry with a G, no relation, totally understand why you would have this wrong. And over time, I was able to turn a measure of the tide to the point where by using social media, I was able to reach other major outlets like ESPN, who then did a story on me. And I was able to hold on to my own brand. Now, did my brand take a hit? Heck yes. Did I take dents in the door? Yes. But I didn't collapse. And I was able to take the lighthouse approach of, I'm going to shine who I am, I'm going to let the storm pass, I'm going to use social media to keep my light on. So there is value in it. Now, is there value sitting around commenting on everybody's political views and cats? No, it's a waste of time. But if you look at most of what's on television, 85% of it's crap. That doesn't mean television's crap. If you select what you use, if you use it intelligently, it can be a positive tool. You know, you can use a chainsaw to trim trees and kind of clean up your yard and make your home look really beautiful. Or you can use it for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's really what you use the tool for. And that's how I approach social media.
And he's still Gerry with a G, I got to tell you that.
Yes, ma'am.
So Gerry, great thoughts today. Thank you for sharing. One of the things that, as leaders, there's obviously so much noise out there.
Right.
And, one of the things that I always look for is where is the best avenue to get information from a leadership standpoint. It's real and it's also productive. Do you have any advice in that area?
So I would say, who's your audience that you're trying to communicate to? And find out where they live. So in terms of social media, so for example, Doug was telling me, I put out a video series, it's called Rules of Engagement. It's just like these 2-3 minute videos, it's presentation tips. Because most people in business are uncomfortable in the front of the room. For years I put them out on Facebook, they got some following. Nobody cared about it on Twitter. Twitter is really an experts, daily news, and hate. That's what sells on Twitter. Put them on LinkedIn, wildfire. So to your point and to your point, it's about matching the medium, the message, and the audience. When we were kids, it was really simple. You had Walter Cronkite, you had Dan Rather, you had PBS. That was it. You had like 3 or 4 choices. That was it. Now you have thousands of choices. And so the leadership dilemma is more of a jigsaw puzzle. Who's your audience? Who's your staff you're trying to communicate? Where do they hang out? What's the message? Now you have to match the message to the medium to the audience. If you can get those aligned, you'll have much greater communication. It's not just about, oh, I'm right wing, I want to watch Fox, I'm left wing, I want to watch CNN. It's more complicated than that. That's the right and the left thing. As a leader, you have something you really want to communicate. Don't think just about what's comfortable for you. Think about your audience. So your dad's not going to text. Your dad's going to call. Your dad's going to do something that Parth and my daughter are not going to do. He's going to leave voicemails. Have you noticed nobody leaves voicemails anymore? That's because everybody's so busy they can't be bothered to leave a 15-second voicemail. The attention span of the average American is now 7 seconds long. Microsoft research, goldfish are at 8. So that's your challenge, is keep these 3 things in mind. What's the message? What's the medium? Where's the audience? And your job as a leader is to align those. Sure.
Steve.
I'm just going along sort of with the distractions in the workplace today and the effects on productivity. Because a lot of employees are just so conditioned to look at their phones a lot. I wanted to get your thoughts as leaders. How do we bring more focus into the workplace? Do we come in and say, look, we have a cell phone policy. We can't use it for a certain period of time. Because in essence, that's what we're paying for. We're paying for the time.
Right.
And what I find is, the lack of focus, because again, it's being compromised. I'm sort of in a dilemma right now, and I don't really know how to approach it.
So part of it is how do you structure your physical space? This is a big one. How do you structure your physical space to give people the benefit of deep dive thinking? It's a lost art. Most workplaces have gone pendulum swing. It used to be like offices, and then it was, let's go all open space. Have you ever tried to concentrate in open space? Like offices like this, we're all doing our laptops, we're on cell. It's chaos. What they've figured out works best is mixed purpose workspace. So that you have some open space, you have some offices, you have some private spaces, you have some conference spaces, but you give your people the flexibility to use them. Like at Channel 11, one of the things I hate at Channel 11, only the managers have doors on their office. Really? Welcome to a 1960s car company. And it's designed, think of the way a factory was designed. Workspace in the middle, managers' offices on the perimeter. If you walk into any newsroom in America, that's how it's set up.
Right.
Go to any school in America, they still ring the bell. You know why they rang the bell in school? It's to mentally prepare them to work in a factory where they would have bells that would ring to tell them it was time for the next task. We're still teaching people, and we're still putting them in workspaces that are the analog world from 100 years ago. And we're pissed off that they want to use their cell phones. I say, you're not going to get them to stop using their cell phones. You're not going to get them to stop using their laptops. So what we have to do is entice them and introduce them to the benefits of having a portion of their day where there's complete focus. Every night at work, don't share this with anybody, I'll probably get in trouble, but every night at work, I disappear in the building. They can't find me for a couple of hours because I find an open office or an open conference room where I can go and just do my Ravens work for 2 hours uninterrupted. Because we all know uninterrupted time, the intellectual benefit is so much greater as opposed to 8 hours of distracted time. So instead of fighting them, put down your cell phones, why not introduce them to an environment in which they can pursue dedicated time, and once they experience the benefits of it, they'll probably come to you to ask for more of it. Because like, I'm not anti-policy, I'm not like an anarchist, but there's a couple things I noticed that don't really motivate people: committees and policies. Like, when was the last time we're like, God, Ray Lewis is going to pull us into this huddle, we're going to face the Steelers, and we're going to talk about our employment policy. No. You need them, but don't lead with them.
And just figure out how to reward for performance.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. You have time for one or two more questions.
I was just going to make
Leonard.
a comment. I was stunned, and I think this is, I don't know if it's the first time, but so I love sports. I'm watching the World Series, and between batters stepping out of the batter's box, now 10 seconds, or now a spot from Duracell.
Yep.
It was 8 seconds long.
Yeah.
These intermittent drops during the game.
Yeah.
So they got the game on this side,
Yeah, the split
and
screen.
10 seconds from Disney over here. I couldn't count.
And behind home plate, did you notice the ads keep changing every batter?
Every
It
batter.
used to be every game.
Yeah.
Then it was every inning. Then it was every half inning. Now it's every batter. Soon it'll be every pitch
It's unbelievable.
because they can fractionalize it. You know where that 8-second spot comes from? Premier League soccer. Premier League in the soccer, because soccer plays uninterrupted halves. So they face the challenge of how are we going to sell ads when the game doesn't stop? So they put in these little 8-second ads while they're moving the ball up the field. And so now other sports have gravitated to it. It's just, look, it's a business. Business has to make money. And you can't do it the way you did 30 years ago. So the thing to keep in mind is, now that I've told you the attention span, here's 2 things I want you to take away from today. 1, pay attention to how little people hold eye contact. 1.2 seconds is the average. Try to hold it for 5 or 7 seconds, you'll own the room. Whether that room is a meeting room, whether that's a conference room, whether you're having a one-on-one with your employee. If you go more than 15 seconds, people will freak out. They'll be like, whoa, me too, what's going on here? But if you can just hold eye contact with somebody for about 5 or 10 seconds, all of a sudden it slows things down and they will feel more confident in your ability to hold the moment. And the other is, we live in a world of shrinking attention spans. So yeah, it's irritating to see all these spots. Just know that they're playing to that. They're not creating that. In 1968, during the presidential election, the average length of a soundbite on network TV, 48 seconds long. Most recent election, 7 seconds long. It's not because politicians have less to say. It's that the audience is giving them less attention. And your people are giving you less attention. So you've got to get to them faster. Now here's the beauty. If you get to them and you connect with them, that'll expand. That 7 second isn't concrete. It's more like latex. It will expand. But you've got to do something meaningful in that first 7 seconds to connect so they stay put, because they have other options. And they're on their phone, they're on a laptop. You'll see more visual stimulation this next week than your great-grandparents saw their entire life. That's the world we live in.
Final question. Chris.
Well, we saw in the World Series that the TV ratings were down, and clearly NFL the last few years. Where is that heading? Is that going to just continue because people don't want to watch the whole thing?
Baseball faces a different challenge than football. Football faces the challenge of needing smaller stadiums because all of their revenue is from TV. The players, the salary cap is based on the TV revenue. Football's got the greatest business model. You all want to be part of this. You show up, turn on the lights, and you've made billions of dollars because of the negotiated TV contract. The problem with football is that it's such a pleasant experience to watch in your home theater, on your 50-inch or 70-inch TV, where you don't have some drunk slob throwing up on your shoulder, where you don't have to deal with parking issues, all of those headaches. So in 1972, when my dad's the head coach of the Baltimore Colts, if you wanted to see the Baltimore Colts play, you had to go to Memorial Stadium.
Right.
Now that created a sense of community, and you enjoyed the experience, and it was a really wonderful thing. Or you could sit at home and watch on Monday Night Football the highlights a day and a half later. Now, at home, you can watch the scoring from every single game simultaneously on the Red Zone. You can watch on the ticker below. You can feed that shrinking attention span. You don't have to leave your house. So TV is making more and more revenue for the league. But if you look around NFL stadiums, if you start to watch closely, you start to, all of a sudden, there's a lot of empty seats. Not just in Baltimore. I mean, all around the country. I've seen one game where the seats were all filled this year. That was the Saints game here. Carolina, lots of blue seats. Everywhere we've gone. So what I would say you're going to see the business model is smaller stadiums so that it looks good on TV.
Like that soccer stadium in LA?
Correct. So that it looks full. Ironically, they can't even fill that. But that's a different story for another day. But so if teams have smaller stadiums, because the Redskins now have blocked off enough of their stadium, they only seat 57,000 people there. They should seat like 80,000. That's how much the in-person space is shrinking. So if you shrink it to look good for TV, the money's in TV, they'll serve TV. Baseball is just a different story because baseball doesn't have the national cachet it once did.
Right.
Much like Rome is no longer the world power. Everything has its day. And after that day, it never reaches that zenith again. Boxing was once America's sport. Horse racing was once America's sport. Baseball was once America's sport. Currently, it's football. But arrogance tends to pull things down, so don't be too sold that you're going to be number one forever.
And we'll leave you with that.
Yep.
Don't be arrogant. Gerry Sandusky, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it. Thank you.